Hi, Chris here from Tech Tablets, and welcome to my Chuwi Hi12 video review. So this is the latest tablet that's just come out by Chuwi, and it's a little different because it's got a 3:2 ratio screen. So not the 4:3 Retina tablets or the usual 16:9 or 16:10 tablets, something slightly different. And it's actually using the old Microsoft Surface Pro 3 screen in here, which is a 12-inch screen with a 2160 by 1440p resolution. So not a bad resolution in a device of this size. So it's relatively heavy, weighs 850 grams, and it's 8.9 millimeters thick. So it's not exactly the thinnest of devices, but the build of it isn't bad at all, with a metal rear housing with a gun metal grey kind of finish to it. We have a rear 5 megapixel camera. On the top here we have a volume up and down rocker and our power on button. There is a front 2 megapixel camera. We have a Windows home button there that works just fine. And on the left side is where all the action is. So we got a micro SD card slot, USB 3.0, and we do have a micro USB in for charging the tablet, USB 2 port, microphone there, and a micro HDMI out, 3.5mm headphone jack, and right here either side are 4 Torx screws securing it all together. So overall the build I'm quite happy with. It's not too bad considering the price of this tablet and that lovely screen you are getting. Now, to compare the size of the Hi12 to other tablets, here's the Chuwi Hi10. You can see there it's a 10.1 inch tablet. And here is the Teclast X98 Air 3. You can see there the size difference between the tablets. I'll move this around. You can get an idea there of just how those dimensions are. So it's a large tablet, and almost as large as the actually it's a little bit larger than the Microsoft Surface Pro 4, which I'll just place on the top here. It's slightly larger. Well, here it looks like the Surface Pro 4 is larger, but it's not. So if I move it around like this, you'll see that it fits into the same kind of space there. But when I sit them both up like this, you can see there that it's slightly taller, the Hi12. So the Hi12 is the first tablet out of China, at least from the Chinese manufacturers, that has a 3:2 ratio screen in it. And it's actually a Samsung PLS display that was used in the Microsoft Surface Pro 3. So it's a reasonably good screen. I think it's pretty much a premium screen. It's got a high resolution for a 12-inch panel, which is 2160 by 1440. And at the moment I have it on the highest brightness settings. It's a little hard to portray on camera because often the sensor will adjust. I'm keeping the exposure on auto because if I don't have it on auto, it'll blow out the colors on full brightness. So it's something very hard to capture. But that is the lowest brightness setting there. You can see it dims down very dim, but if you do turn off lights, then you can see that actually you're able to see the screen quite well. Now I have a lot of lighting on here at the moment. If I increase this now to 25%, that's 50%, but of course the camera is adjusting also to this 75 and then 100. It's reasonably bright. Now this is the Chuwi Hi10 that I'll just put in the shot quickly to show you the screen. A similar kind of brightness, but it has more of a cool white screen compared to the Hi12 screen. And if I now add the Surface Pro 4 into the shot, on maximum brightness, you'll see that it is definitely a lot better because it also has a fully laminated display. Now there's also a couple of other things to think about as well, that the fact that I've still got the screen protector on the Hi12. You see there, if I can try and angle them both at the same angle, side by side there. All in all, I don't think it's a bad screen considering the price range of this tablet here. Now if I put the lights back on, you'll see that the surface is definitely a hell of a lot better here because it's not a non-laminated display, so not really a fair test either way because they're fully laminated versus non-laminated. Now to focus back on the 2160 screen of the Chuwi, I just wanted to point out one thing that I did have to do to get maximum brightness out of the screen, and now that is, if you head into the Intel graphics properties, you're going to want to have to disable this one, the display power saving technology. If you enable that, that is enabled by default, and what it does, it will lower the brightness of the backlight. You can see there, it's slowly just tweaking it back a little, and that lowers the brightness somewhat. I'd say an estimated 20%. So I recommend disabling that to get maximum brightness. Of course, if you want power saving, then leave that untouched. And if you're gaming, then you want to disable the extended battery life for gaming too. Now your normal performance in Windows I find is really good. Everything seems to pop up quite fast, and it doesn't really feel like an Atom PC to me. Now it does come with Windows 10 Home, and that does support additional language packs if you're worried about that. And it's fully activated. Normally you don't have any problems with activation. It's just the odd time I have seen only really happened once or twice. I have seen manufacturers actually ship out tablets without a legitimate license. Now that happened with i7 Stylus, the Windows 8.1, the first batch. They later corrected that and used legitimate licenses. Of course, I don't even know how they got away with doing that, but you don't have to normally ever worry about that. But it's definitely fully activated, which is good to see. And moving around, this is my micro SD card. Things just load up pretty quick. I'll go to Device Manager. That can sometimes be pretty slow to load, and it loads up just fine. Overall, I have no complaints, and the screen accuracy is really good. You can see here I'm not having any problems moving things around. You can go along and select, and I'm touching it as I would any other tablet, so as I would with my Surface Pro 4. I don't need to push hard or anything like that. I get a lot of questions in the comments saying, how is touch accuracy? Do I need to press harder? It's not one of those screens. It's the older style screen which had that older technology, but this works fine. Accuracy is good, and in just getting around, no problems there. So just go into Edge and quickly show you what it's like. If I'm just going to load up tech tablets, and because it's got the 3:2 ratio screen, I find it's really good to use in portrait like this. And if your hands are big enough, I don't have particularly big hands, but you can actually type with your thumbs. Let's see if I can do that here. And quite nice to use the tablet in portrait mode like this. I find it's a little bit better than landscape, and you can get and load a whole lot of the website in just one go and read it all there without having to scroll as much. Okay, because of the zoom, the website's loaded like that, but it's very smooth, very quick, as Edge tends to be. Now Chrome, on the other hand, isn't as fast. Chrome doesn't seem to be optimized as well for atoms. So if I just load up Chrome here now, it takes a little while to load in there and load up a website that's reasonably heavy that I haven't visited yet, which is probably, what haven't I visited yet? BBC.com. See how quick that is to load in Chrome. Not actually that bad at all. Popped up quite quick. But you see there, look at that difference on scrolling. Scrolling in Chrome is a little choppy. If you're not using it as a tablet like this and more of a desktop. So if you've plugged in a mouse and keyboard, then Chrome's okay. The experience is alright until you start to look at things like 4K video. If you decide to stream a 4K clip via YouTube, then Chrome just bogs down and it's pretty unbearable and unusable there. But if you use Edge seems to work just fine. And look at that difference in scrolling there. And of course, you flip that back around. And still choppy there, and still nice and smooth and quick in Edge. So I benchmarked the internal storage, and these are the speeds, which aren't bad for an eMMC 4.5.1 spec drive. Good write speeds, considering my Surface 3 that I had that has the Atom X7 in it, that had write speeds around 40-50 megabytes per second sequential writes, and this is a lot faster. Now it's a Hynix drive, and you can see that it's the HCG8E drive. If you want to look that up, research that. It's not a bad drive, it's a brand drive. Now Chuwi, what they've been doing normally on their lower spec tablets, at least in the VI8 and the H8 series, they've been using B1 drives, which are horrible and very slow with extremely poor random read and write speeds. Now these random read and write speeds here of 19 and 13 are perfectly fine for this kind of drive and really good, considering that I think some of the speeds I got out of my HI8 were around 2 or 3 megabytes per second write rates, and that's incredibly slow, and it can lead to longer installing times. Well, definitely depends on what you're installing. If you were installing something like, just off the top of my memory, Paint Shop, that takes a long time to install, sorry, Photoshop takes a long time to install that, then it's going to be a little bit longer if you're installing that on this type of a system. Now I also ran through the usual benchmarks that I do, and I'll just show you those. They are in fact on the full written review that is on techtablets.com, but I'll quickly go through them in the video here. The results that I managed to get out of this particular Hi12 that I have with me are quite good. Now I did get some reasonably fast speeds as well out of the USB 3 port. Those are the speeds I got there from my SanDisk Extreme USB 3 flash drive. Those are pretty much the maximum speeds that this drive can get. And it will power a external hard drive without any problems from either port. No power issues there. If I run down to where I did actually the benchmarks, here we go. So the Geekbench 3 score, they're not amazing scores, but for the chipset and Atom X5 Z8300, these are the higher end that I've seen on this particular chipset. So this Atom is the lower end Cherry Trail. There is the mid-range one, which is the Z8500, and then you have the X7, which is the X7 8700 that clocks up to, I think it's 2.4 gigahertz. This chip only clocks up to 1.84, so a little slower there. And the Ice Storm score, quite good, one of the higher ones I've actually seen. 3D Mark 11 score, of course, is extremely low if you compare that to a desktop PC or a gaming PC. That's an horrendous score, really. That is super low, but we're talking about a tablet running an Atom here. PC Mark 7 score, again, a little bit higher, and the Colgate score, again, high for the particular chipset. And also just to show you here that some of the temperatures I got out of the chipset. So maximum temperatures 79 degrees. Now in order for me to get and hit 79 degrees, I actually had to run Furmark and Intel burn test, which isn't a real world test. This is a synthetic benchmark and I don't really agree with it. But gaming, I saw temperatures of 76 degrees and I don't think it ever really got over that. So it's keeping under 80 degrees, which is actually a lot cooler than most tablets, which is good to see.
Now I'm just going to test out the audio across various different devices and compare the sound. I'm first going to just play the Chuwi Hi12 and then move over to other tablets and then back to the Chuwi Hi12. Okay, so the Hi12 here. Now the Tech Class X98 Air 3. Now the Chuwi Hi10. And now the Surface Pro 4. And back to the Hi12. So hopefully you can hear just from this little test here that the speakers in the Hi12 actually aren't that bad. The Chuwi Hi10 definitely being the worst, and I'd say second to last the X98 Air 3, and of course the more expensive and more premium tablet, the Surface Pro 4, has much better sound. They're very high quality speakers on those ones.
Now gaming, I'm just going to test out one game here, and that is Asphalt 8 Airborne. It's a store game. I'm going to run with the native screen resolution, which is 2160 by 1440p. The only thing I've changed is the settings. I've reduced it from the extreme setting down to medium, which I thought was a much better suited to the chipset that it has in it, because extreme settings on this resolution is just far too demanding for an Atom X5Z 8300. Now, if you want to see more gaming, I do have another clip that's up on the YouTube channel, so do check that out. Now I'm going to use a Xbox. Oh, nice big advertising there. So I'm going to use an Xbox 360 controller plugged in, just so I can control it a little better. And we'll see how it runs. So you can see here that the frame rate is perfectly playable. Very smooth. I just got to say it's around 30 frames per second. It probably dips down a little bit. You can see sometimes it gets a little tiny bit of lag there. But overall, I think it's running just fine, considering the fact that it's quite a high resolution it's running at. Now for your other games, your popular online games like League of Legends, Counter-Strike, you're going to have to lower the resolution and also lower those settings right down to the lowest possible to get anything close to playable frame rates. And as I mentioned, I do have a video of that up, so do check that out if you are interested in seeing more on the gaming performance of this particular tablet. So what about the battery life? Actually, I've found the battery life to be good. I expected the battery life to be quite poor considering the panel that's in here, a larger 12-inch panel. We do have an 11,000 milliamp hour battery, but I thought it might struggle with the resolution to keep up and keep enough charge, and we might have poor results. At the moment, I have been running the screen brightness quite high. I've been, well, almost 2 hours there. I'm just reading that there with the stats. On for 2 hours, and I'm now at 76%. Now, what I've actually been doing is a bit of web work and some of these clips you're seeing right now that I'm recording, but I also watched an episode of the X-Files season 10. It's, I think, about 45 minutes. And in that 45 minutes running that episode, I lost 10%. Now, I was running 50% battery life. Sorry, not 50% battery life, 50% screen brightness is what I wanted to say. And I think that's pretty good considering the screen size and the brightness level. Now, I do have that display power saving technology from Intel disabled. If you enable that, you might get even better results. And if you lower the brightness, of course, down to 25%, or even tweak it down to 40% or something manually, then you're going to probably get even better then. So you're looking around, I'd say, 8 hours of video watching. Some of the results here that I did some rough testing. Web browsing, 50% brightness, you're going to get about 6 hours, 6.5 hours. If you game, then you're only going to get about 3 hours because gaming just burns through the battery. And mixed documents, multitasking, 5 to 6 hours. That's a little bit more demanding because you're loading up the RAM, and that consumes battery life, of course. Using more RAM consumes more. So if you're multitasking, what I was doing at that particular time is I had Edge open with about 5 or 6 tabs open and Chrome with about 3 tabs. I was also running HW Info and a few other things in the background and moving a few files around and whatnot. And that, I would say, was a bit of multitasking. And I got about 5.5 hours from doing that, which I think is acceptable, the battery life on the Chuwi Hi12. That didn't come out too bad considering it's only got a 5 megapixel rear facing camera. Now, cameras on tablets, at least these Windows tablets coming out of China, have never been good. It's never been their strong point. And again, we're seeing a pretty hopeless camera that isn't that good. But it can still take macro shots with text and things like that if you needed to. If you, for example, you had some sort of diagram or you needed to take a photo of a part number, then it can actually do that. Something that my Surface Pro 3 could not do that had a fixed focus. So if you want to take a photo of text, it came out blurry. And outdoor photos look okay. I mean, they're not too bad. Colors seem okay here. Normally they're quite washed out, but it came out okay. That photo there. And overall, you're going to get nothing really special out of the cameras. Now, using them for something like voice chat, like Skype, they are fine if you're in good lighting conditions. As soon as you move into low light, then the cameras start to suffer a bit. You do see a bit of grain come into it. It looks a little blurry, but the front-facing 2 megapixel camera is, I think, sufficient for Skype. It's not going to be an award-winning front-facing camera. It's going to just do the job, and that is pretty much it. And you want to have good lighting for that. And just to demonstrate here, it would also power an external USB 3 hard drive, 1 terabyte or 2 terabyte drive. Sometimes I have problems with some of these tablets I've tested, but luckily this isn't the case with the Chuwi Hi12. So if I plug in now my drive, you'll see that there's a blue light, which means USB 3 mode, and the folder has actually just popped up there. So no trouble whatsoever running external hard drives. So you can actually get away here plugging in and using every single port. I have the micro USB in charging, I have 2 USB pen drives plugged in, micro HDMI cable, and even my 3.5mm headphone jack. And it's a little bit tight here, but it does all just fit in there without any problems. Now, there's been a few tablets that have had poor design on this, and the fact that you couldn't actually charge or fit in a wider USB pen drive here. But these are very snug, but it's working, which is good to see. Okay, so just to recap on my findings, the pros and cons of this tablet, I think the touch response is great. The screen is really nice considering it's a 12-inch screen, so rather large, but you still get a reasonably sharp display and quite hard to see pixels. Okay, it's not a Retina tablet, it's got around 216 ppi, but I still think on a 12-inch device it's good enough, and the brightness, once you disable those Intel graphics power settings, is bright enough indoors, looks good, great to use, a very good media tablet for those looking for something that's a little larger and has great performance when it comes to just scrolling and touch and basic kind of tasks. It's no gaming tablet, doesn't have that kind of power you want to play any serious games on it, but it will play lighter titles as you've seen, and even the store games work surprisingly well there. The only cons really I can say are the speakers do have a slight hiss that comes out of them. If you put your ear up to the speaker when there's no sound playing, or you're tapping away with the Windows keyboard, you can hear a tiny bit of hiss coming out of the speakers there. And then when you connect up the 3.5mm headphone jack, I've also noticed that there's a tiny bit of interference coming through there. But overall, I can highly recommend this tablet for those people that want a larger tablet. And even though I haven't seen the keyboard yet, at the time of this review, I'm hoping it's going to be a large keyboard and very practical and usable. But those two USB ports are very handy indeed to have there, very good for transferring files. So overall, gets my thumbs up. Thank you for watching this review. Hopefully see you back in the channel with more up and coming reviews on tablets and mobile phones. Bye for now.